Welcome to Laboratory M4, where we will cover the shoulder and arm muscles.
Cross off the innervation portion and right branch of the brachial plexus. And you can see I put stars on these four muscles here. These are your rotator cuff muscles, which we'll talk about next. So we're going to start off with the deltoid, and this is that triangular shaped muscle on our shoulder. So think delta, like the delta triangle. It's the deltoid shape. And this originates from what I like to call sac, spine of the scapula, acromion, and clavicle. So it's that same place where trapezius is inserting. It's just trapezius is inserting above, deltoid is originating from below. And insertion is going to be that special place on the humerus, deltoid tuberosity, and the action is to flex, extend, medially and laterally rotate, and abduct the arm. So almost every type of action you can have at the shoulder joint except for adduction. And innervation is branch of the brachial plexus. Next we have supraspinatus, and this originates from that supraspinous fossa we learned about. And it's going to insert into the greater tubercle on the humerus. So we don't really see that insertion here because it's going below this spine of the scapula and acromion to get there. It's going to abduct the arm. That makes sense because it's coming in, here's my origin, and inserting from above. So when this insertion, when this muscle contracts, the insertion always moves toward the origin. So when we pull this insertion toward the origin, it's going to lift our arm up to abduct. And innervation is branch of the brachial plexus. Here's just a closer view of the supraspinatus. And now you could see a little bit better how that insertion into the greater tubercle takes place. Infraspinatus is found at the origin of the infraspinous fossa, and it too is going to go and insert into the greater tubercle. Its action is different though because its origin is at a different place. So we pull that insertion closer to the infraspinous fossa and we get lateral rotation of the arm. And its innervation is the branch of the brachial plexus. So in this view you can kind of see a little bit better. Here's my infraspinatus muscle inserting into the greater tubercle. Now we have our teres minor, and teres minor is this little guy over here, and it's originating from the lateral border of the infraspinous fossa. Sorry, I got 3 S's in there, I just realized. And the insertion is the greater tubercle. So almost all of these rotator cuff muscles are inserting into the greater tubercle, and its action is going to be lateral rotation of the arm as well, same as infraspinatus. And the reason for that is we have a similar origin and same insertion. So same action. And innervation is branch of the brachial plexus. So here's another view of our teres minor, and you could see it's really a small muscle inserting over to the greater tubercle as well. Next we have subscapularis, and this one is the last one of our rotator cuff muscles. It's going to originate from the subscapular fossa, and that's why we have this anterior view of it. And it wants to go over to the greater tubercle, but there's just no space left. So it's going to go over to the lesser tubercle, which is located more anteriorly anyway. So it's just perfect. And now we have a little bit different line of pull, so we're going to do the opposite here and go for medial rotation of the arm. And innervation is the branch of the brachial plexus. And here's another view of that subscapularis muscle inserting into that lesser tubercle. What's this muscle here? If you said supraspinatus, you are correct. This one here? If you said infraspinatus, you are correct. This muscle here? If you said teres minor, you are correct. And this is just a little bit different view of our rotator cuff muscles. It is a lateral view. So you can really see how each of these rotator cuff muscles are rotated around the head of the humerus or your shoulder joint. So the way we remember your rotator cuff muscles is by the mnemonic sits. And this goes a little bit further because you can think you can sit on the greater tubercle, but you cannot sit on the greater tubercle. So if we were memorizing insertions, you would know that SIT here, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor all insert on the greater tubercle, but the subscapularis does not. It's going to go and insert onto that lesser tubercle. So we just have teres major left, and that's going to be located right below teres minor. Its origin is the inferior angle of the infraspinous fossa, again 3 S's, sorry about that, and insertion is just a little bit lower at the crest of the lesser tubercle. So because of the change in the line of pull, we could do medial rotation and a deduction of the arm here, and its innervation is the branch of the brachial plexus. So here's just a little bit different view. You could see your supraspinatus here, infraspinatus here, teres minor here, and teres major down in here. Oh, I forgot I had these labeled. And there's our teres major. Whoops. So you want to notice that this is also moving a little bit more anteriorly. It starts here on the posterior surface of the scapula, but then it moves anteriorly below. This is a tendon of our, this is one of the heads of our triceps in order to make it to that crest of the lesser tubercle. So you'll notice that some of the muscles we're discussing all share similar actions. So I wanted to kind of put this in perspective for you guys. And looking at the humerus here, we have your pectoralis major inserting at that crest of the greater tubercle, your latissimus dorsi inserting at the intertubercular sulcus, and the teres major inserting at the crest of your lesser tubercle. So once again, you don't have to know these insertions, but I just want you to think about this a little bit as far as how these muscles work. And so you see that all these are lined up right next to one another. So they are all going to adduct and medially rotate. They're all doing those same functions because they are inserting at similar places. The only difference is pectoralis major is anterior, so that is also going to flex the arm. Latissimus dorsi is posterior, so that is going to extend the arm. And teres major is just a small muscle, so it has no additional action. Now let's get into the arm. We are going to talk about our posterior arm muscles and anterior arm muscles. So really your, and I should have moved this up a little bit, but your triceps are the only muscle you're going to have on your posterior arm. In your anterior arm, you have your biceps, and this should be shifted because your long head and short head belong to your biceps brachii. And then you have your coracobrachialis and your brachialis muscles. So starting off with the triceps on the posterior arm, you have your long head, your lateral head, and then we have to peel away a layer in order to see your medial head. So your long head is in place here. We cut away your lateral head. So these are the pieces of your lateral head left, and we could see your medial head. So let's go back to this view here, and let's talk about your long head first. It's going to originate from the infraglenoid tubercle. So we don't really see that origin here because it's hidden underneath those other muscles. Your lateral head originates on the humerus above the radial nerve. Now, if you're like, what is this radial nerve? It is right below the lateral head. So let me pull this away real quick. So when we cut away this lateral head here, you can see this radial nerve. And this radial nerve is the one that innervates this muscle, okay? So what we're left with is your medial head, and this is originating from the humerus below the radial nerve. And all of these will insert into the olecranon process, or your elbow. So when we contract this muscle, it is going to extend our forearm at the elbow. And from now on, these innervations that are listed are ones you should know. So this is innervated by the radial nerve. And this is just a view of this radial nerve. So it's coming off of your brachial plexus as well, but it's more of the terminal branches. And we'll get into that more in the nervous system. But, whoops, sorry about that. But this radial nerve is extending down the posterior side, of your arm as well as your posterior forearm. So it supplies all of those muscles, posterior arm and posterior forearm muscles. Next, we have your biceps brachii. And by the way, bi means two, sep means head, and brachii means arm. So this is a two-headed muscle of the arm. So that would make your triceps your three-headed muscle of the arm, right? So first we have our long head, and there's your short head. Now you might be thinking like, okay, Mrs. B, this doesn't make sense. Why is the long head short and the short head is long? But the reason for this is this long head that you see in green actually continues up into the shoulder joint to originate at the supraglenoid tubercle. So it, in actuality, is longer. And the short head, I don't know why my origin got deleted here, but it's going to originate from the coracoid process. Then both of these heads go and insert into the radial tuberosity on the radius. And its action is not only to flex the forearm, like most of us know, but it's also to supinate the forearm. So it's kind of that lateral rotation of the forearm as well. And this, along with all the other muscles in the anterior arm, are innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve. Next, we have Coracobrachialis. This is one of my favorite muscles because it's easy to identify for me. I can always tell because 88% of the time we have the musculocutaneous nerve piercing this muscle. It's going to originate from the coracobrachialis, and then it inserts into the middle medial humerus. Its action, it's a small muscle, so it's only going to flex the arm, and innervation is the musculocutaneous nerve. So if you were this is saying how 88% of the time the nerve pierces this muscle. But if you were having a hard time and you wanted to memorize the insertion of coracobrachialis, I always remember coracopuffs. So is for your middle medial humerus. Middle medial humerus, there it is. Okay, and lastly, we have your brachialis muscle. This is originating from your lower humerus, and it inserts into the coronoid process of the ulna. So you can see this tendon over here. That would be the tendon of biceps brachii, because it's inserting into that radial tuberosity. So coronoid process of the ulna for the brachialis, radial tuberosity for the biceps brachii. The action of this is going to be flex the forearm, and this is because this muscle is crossing your elbow joint. Whatever joint you're crossing, that's the joint it's working on. So like when we look up here at coracobrachialis, it's crossing the shoulder joint and inserting onto the arm. So that's where its action is. It's going to flex the arm at the shoulder. Whereas brachialis, it's going to flex the forearm at the elbow. And innervation is musculocutaneous nerve. This muscle is also, I want to mention, found deep to biceps brachii, so that's why we're only seeing that small tendon here because we've cut it